Oh.
It's time for me to start, so I'm going to start. And I have the computer for an audience, so if y'all want to carry on, feel free. It's very narcissistic. Talking to the computer. But hey, it's just kind of like real life, isn't it? So think about a dream. When you start to dream, where do you get the information from what's going on? You get it from the dream itself. You pick up all sorts of cues. I mean, you just find yourself in some sort of a weird situation. There seems to be maybe certain qualities present or whatever. And you somehow, I mean, of course, this is very difficult to try to sort out or parse, because usually by the time you notice you're in the dream, you're already completely sucked into the dream, and it's already a kind of a de facto event. You're already completely identified with the circumstances you seem to find yourself in, and the persona you seem to be, and so on and so forth. I mean, if you could somehow look at the arising or the genesis of that mindset, where you're orienting to the dream as consisting of a certain situation, more or less, with certain elements present, more or less, and yourself as a certain entity present, more or less. It's sort of abstracted from cues that are present experientially, right? There are certain moods present, certain qualities present, certain, pseudo-sensory kinds of experiences present. And on the basis of that, certain conclusions are drawn as to what seems to be going on. And that then, of course, becomes reifying, becomes self-verifying, and then all of a sudden you are in the dream, and it actually is what you're thinking it is, and you're reacting to it that way, and so on and so forth. And if we could look at our own life experience that way, we would find probably something very similar. When you're born, you don't know what's going on, you don't know where you are, you don't know what you are, you don't know what's happening, you don't know anything whatsoever about the circumstances that are present. But various cues are drawn. There's all sorts of various qualities present, various flavors and characteristics present. And there's a great deal, of course, of a kind of a conditioning education present that's going on from the parents and just from the general actions of the environment. And so we end up abstracting on the basis of what is presenting itself, our mindset of what this is. Oh, this is a world. I'm in the body. This is a person. There's other people. There's other bodies or other people, and so on and so forth. And basically the whole typical consensus reality mindset, or some version, whatever version you adopt, just becomes present in the mind. And then a curious thing happens, where rather than the events, the circumstances, experiential characteristics that are present being the basis for these abstractions, it sort of switches place, where the abstractions are held to be objectively true, and then the experiential circumstances are fitted into it. So that this is an objective world is held to be just undeniable fact. And then whether or not experience comes and goes, whether or not experience is slippery, you get really drunk or really stoned or something, and the world is a little bit less objective, right? But that doesn't faze you, because no, this is an objective world, and so on and so forth. So the seeming solidity and the seeming stability, the seeming coherence of the interpretive framework that spontaneously occurs within the consciousness, which has basically been bootstrapped out of nothing. It's been suggested from innuendo. I mean, think of a dream. In a dream, you're whatever, you're starting with basically nothing, just sort of, vague sensory experiences or whatever's appearing. And that turns into a whole scenario, and you're involved in various things, and there's various things happening, and you're trying to achieve this or get away from that. And it's bootstrapped up from nothing. There's nothing there in the start of the dream, and yet it becomes this relatively solidified thing, and can become really urgent, where you're really struggling hard to achieve something or avoid something or run away from some monster or whatever. I mean, whatever the dream happens to be. And this seems to be so solidified and so reified, just out of nothing. And then the dream ends and it's all gone. Poof, bang, may as well never have happened. And you wake up and all of a sudden you're in this world. And no, this is real. It really matters. It matters what happens here. I have to take care of my body. I have to, achieve my goals. I have to not get arrested. I have to do these various things. And then you lie in bed and I drift off to sleep. And what happens? All this is poof, it's gone. Bang, it's gone. And then where are you? You don't know where you are. And then a dream starts. And again, this whole process occurs again and again. The point here is that the nature of our consciousness spontaneously puts the cart before the horse, puts the interpretation before the experiential evidence for the interpretation, in terms of an interpretive framework, in terms of interpreting what is going on, who you are, where you are, what the world is. We build up. The consciousness spontaneously has settled on a more or less coherent view of, oh, this is an objective world. I'm an individual human being with a history. I'm in this body. I'm here. I'm not there. I'm separate from that. And all the trappings of consensus reality that we're all very familiar with. And all of this becomes an undeniable fact. It's just held. It's locked in the concrete in the unconscious. It's just, if someone tried to tell you it wasn't like that, you'd say, hey, you're nuts. What are you telling me? There's no world. That's insane. But it's completely ass backwards, because in actual fact, the sensory experience that all of this framework is derived from doesn't actually conform to the nature of this framework. Our actual sensory experience and mental experience and experience on all levels is very dynamic, very fluid. It comes and goes. It's very slippery. And yet we all are very familiar, I assume most of you, if you have a semi-functioning psyche, are very familiar with this, this sort of a objective world mindset of who's who and what's what and what's going on. And all of this, the amazing fact, the amazing condition is all of this is bootstrapped up out of the flimsiest of evidence. And on that basis is held, or in spite of that basis, is held to be undeniable, unshakable fact. And the actual slipperiness and open-endedness of real-time experience, which is the basis for all of that analytical framework, the basis for all that interpretive framework of what we hold this to be, is ignored, even though this is what's actual, and this interpretive framework is an abstraction. Somehow this has been turned around, where the interpretive framework becomes the actuality, and the slipperiness of the actuality of moment-to-moment experience is skipped over. And this is the essential spiritual dilemma. This is the essential spiritual problem. And the essential spiritual solution, of course, is to simply notice that this is the case. To come to see what is actual. The actuality is experience which only occurs instantaneously in the moment, right here, right now, always. It's never otherwise. It has no past. It has no future. It's entirely unanalyzable with certainty. You can't tell for certain exactly what any circumstance is, because it's completely unstable in time, and it's completely unanalyzable in terms of the information content that's present. In other words, you look and try and pin down precisely what anything is experientially, and you find yourself lost in a fractal sea. Many of you that have heard me talk before, have heard me say many times, just look at your face in the mirror for 10 minutes, just trying to say, what do I look like? What does my face look like? And you look in the mirror. Well, I look like that. Yeah, okay, you look like that, but what is it exactly is it that you look like? And you look and you look, and the longer you look, the less you can tell what you look like. It's the strangest phenomena. And of course, the same phenomena is observable with any experience whatsoever. You can, what shape is my hand? What does my hand look like? What color is my hand? There's no final version. There's no resolution. There's no condition that it stabilizes and sets down to actually become. In fact, the longer I look, the more information I get, and the information doesn't actually cohere into a stable whole. So it's easy to discover that experience is a very slippery, the actuality of experience is a very slippery, open-ended, strange phenomena, spontaneously appearing from nowhere, in nothing. You can't find the perceiver. We assume, oh, I'm the perceiver and I'm looking at my consciousness. But you can't find the perceiver. So it's just an empty assertion. It's a logical assumption. There is perception, so there must be a perceiver. But you can't find it. What, look right now. What is seeing your experience right now? What is actually, what is it that is seeing? Is it something that's sitting somewhere over here and somehow seeing your experience? And I think if you look closely, you'll find you can't find anything like that. There's just this presence of all this amazing readout or whatever it is. And likewise, when you try and pin down what's being seen, well, what's being seen? Light's being seen, sounds being seen, perceived, thoughts being perceived, sensations being perceived, various other vibes and moods are being perceived. But when you go looking at any of those very closely, it becomes very slippery again. What exactly is light? It's light. And who knows what light is? Physicists don't know what light is. What is sound? What is thought? What is sensation? And you look at these things, look at the actuality of these things rather than abstractions or thoughts or, philosophy. What is the actuality that is here? Something is here, or it wouldn't look like all this, right? What is it that's here? And you can't answer that question, right? It's obviously actual, it's obviously real, it's palpably present. You're totally being engaged with already, and yet you can't resolve what it is. I mean, how weird is that? How bizarre is that? And typically, most people don't bother to look at this. We don't bother to notice this because I think most people think it's not very interesting. Most people think, well, I'm more worried about, my money or my social popularity or my sex life or my this or my that or my football team or whatever it is that people are, excited about. But if you look at what all of that is made of, you come back to this immediate presence of this right here, this field of light, this field of sound, this field of sensation, this field of just different vibes. It's just present instantaneously, miraculously, just shows up from nowhere, disappears to nowhere, being seen by nothing, just this astounding, weird actuality that is here. And it's not saying it's a world. It's not saying it's in space. It's not saying it's in time. I mean you go to sleep at night and you dream and all of a sudden there's space. You may be in a world and you're wandering around, you get in the car and you drive somewhere, or you fly somewhere, or whatever it is you're doing. Where's the space come from? I mean, you're lying in bed with your eyes closed. Where's the space come from? It's a virtual space that just appears in consciousness. Where's this space come from? You close your eyes, where's this space go? It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't come from anywhere. It's not here. It's not here. It's just weird. It's a weird virtual apparition, which seems to be a certain way and doesn't stand up to scrutiny. It doesn't stand up to examination. If you look very closely at the actuality of experience, you notice it's very, very strange, very slippery. And this strangeness and slipperiness is actually an opportunity. It's rather so far from being a problem. It's a wonderful opportunity for fun, for excitement, for, oh, wow, I thought I was just boring, stuck in this boring life being this neurotic person that I happen to be in this crappy circumstance that I'm trying to muddle through, doing a half-assed job. But actually something much more interesting is going on, something much stranger is going on. This astounding phenomenon that is amazing. It's astounding. It's unresolvable. It's just completely fun. It's trippy. And, that's kind of nice, especially ultimately, and from a spiritual point of view, when you notice that that's all there is. This is all there is. This weirdness, this bizarre, miraculous actuality that's instantaneously present is all that there is. And the way in which it is that is all that there is. And the way in which it is that is completely bizarre. So anyway, that's a quick overview of my my perspective on it. I invite discussion. Yeah.
Yeah, but I want some sort of place to rest.
Well, but here you are. You're resting, right?
But it sort of freaks me out to feel like there's there's something safe about my mind and my concepts.
Well, that's very typical. This is what people ordinarily feel. And people look at this stuff and go, wait a minute, whoa, this is weird, this is scary. You're taking my world away from me. But the world isn't the world of your concept isn't being taken away. It was never here. All that's ever been here is just this that is here. And you can have your concepts just here they are, right? Here's your concept. You want your world, here's your world as much as it ever was, right? But you don't need you can hang out with your concepts as much as you want. And you can leave your concepts and go to actuality, and you don't actually lose anything because you aren't going anywhere.
But I don't understand anything, and I want to understand in others so I can control.
Wouldn't that be nice? You can control, right? So you control things, do you? Do you control your thoughts? Do you get to think whatever you plan to think? You've already decided to think it before you think it, right? Does that happen? Do you get to plan your desires before you want anything? You get to decide you're going to want it before you want it? Does that actually happen?
Well, but it's like I went to grad school for a long time and studied a lot of philosophy, and
sure.
I'll think about the paper that I'm writing and sort of plot out a course and
sure. But you can do that. Obviously, you can do that because you did it. So that's not being taken away from you. It just the true context of that occurrence is here available for you to explore if you're interested. And if you don't want it, that's absolutely cool.
The true context?
Yeah. This actuality that's here, the way that it is that.
Well, the thing is like the more I sort of open spiritually, it seems the harder it is to write papers, the harder it is to
well, that may be so.
It seems like I'm a lot more here, and then I don't know, I don't understand how you do it, how you move so quickly with your mind in this nothingness.
But you've been doing it. How do you move? Your mind moves in the same nothingness, and it's not nothingness. It's this
articulate way. I mean, like it seems like it's.
I'm just a good bullshit artist. That doesn't mean anything, and that's just practice. Or temperament or whatever. But that's not the fact of being able to talk well doesn't mean much. And nothing I'm saying is true, because what's true cannot be put into words. If I'm artful, what I'm saying is an invitation to investigate that fact. So I mean, you can look at all the philosophy papers you've written or read and all that. You can look at all that, and that's obviously doable because you've done it. And you can be as glib as you want, or as insightful and precise and well-reasoned as you want, and all that's fine. It's a beautiful art form. But it's an art form that exists within this actuality as it is. It's not an either or. It's not like the one cancels out the other. It's just a matter of the actual foundation of all of that is this actuality. And the fact that the nature of this actuality is very strange is not its fault, or maybe it is its fault. But it doesn't negate or cancel out anything you can do with it. So it's possible to live a human life. It's possible to have a neurotic personality. It's possible to, to study philosophy and write papers, and then no harm, no foul, because they aren't mutually exclusive.
It's, yeah, like I feel like I don't understand moving.
Well, but there's nothing to you can't understand anything. That's a very deep insight to see that you can't understand anything. But the fact that you can't understand anything is just a starting point. And that is the actual starting point on which everything is erected. That's the starting point on which philosophy is erected. That's the starting point on which physics is erected. That's the starting point on which, human politics is erected. It's all just sort of bootstrapped up from that by artful fabrication.
But is there this contradiction or opposition between the mind and heart mind? And
No. It's all the same. It's all just different bandwidths or different flavors or vectors of the same thing. There's no separation. Where does emotion come from? Where does feeling come from? Where does thought come from? They're all just aspects of this weird apparition that is here. That you actually are, that this actually is. It doesn't take anything away. It's just the actual context. It doesn't cancel anything out or negate anything.
But then, why do I feel like I'm less able to think?
I don't know. You're speaking very articulately. You're obviously thinking adequately. Speaking good English.
Like coming up with concepts in the same sort of way, or maybe it's just like the motivation shifts or something.
It may well shift, but that's par for the course. Our motivations shift many times as we mature, as we, when you're a child, you have certain motivations that, many of which involve sandboxes and model trucks, and when you're a teenager, many of your motivations are sexual or whatever, and you get older and your motivations become so, I don't know, whatever. It depends on where you go. So these things always are shifting and morphing and moving into new efflorescences.
And I want to have certain capacities and build certain capacities.
Well, you're free to the extent you can. I mean, you're as much free to as you ever have been. If you want to develop your ability to philosophize, you have at it. There's nothing holding you back. There's nothing in the way other than the own limitations of your ability. And you don't know a priori what those are until you stumble upon them. And even then you don't know, because you might find that you supersede what you thought was an impediment.
I've heard it said that love and wisdom are like two sides of the same coin.
Sure.
And
they're just different words for the same thing. What love actually is the essential integration of this with itself. In other words, what this is always includes itself. It never departs from itself, which means that all phenomena, all energies whatsoever, are of the same thing and within the same thing and from the same thing. So this is love. This is absolute harmony. So all phenomena whatsoever are inclusive in this. And so this is the truth of love. So you and me are in love, in the sense that we are in a continuum that is including us transparently, without impediment or without censorship. And wisdom is simply the fact that this inclusiveness is not inert. it is actually profoundly intelligent. It's profoundly, well, intelligent is a good way to put it, just leave it at that. So it is insightful, it is able to integrate its cross correlations and its degrees of apparent difference and all of these various aspects, of the complexity of all of these energies and their harmonies and their disharmonies, artfully and skillfully, and just inherently, it just shows up. Poof, it's just there. It's just like intelligence. You don't have to churn out some intelligence. It's just here, right? To the extent it is.
And so when you're speaking, you're just speaking about what is.
Yeah.
What is
Just talking about this that's here. This that is here. I haven't remembered anything or memorized any Bill of Rights or platform or. I just look and I talk about what I see. Because there's only one thing here, and what it is not. It doesn't block itself. It doesn't get in its own way. So it's completely transparent what this is that is here. And so one can just look at it, see what it is, and talk about it. It's like looking out a window. If you're looking out a window and I say, what do you see out the window? Then you can just describe what you see out the window. Because the window is transparent, right? And experiences like that, doesn't impede itself. So the nature of experience is present in the experiencing with absolute clarity. And even if it's unclear, that unclarity is present with absolute clarity. Say you're dizzy or stoned or, got hit on the head or something, that phenomena is all present with absolute clarity, right? With absolute presence.
And so when you speak about relationships, it's the same sort of thing.
Of course. Relationships are always abstractions, and the actuality is always a complete integration. Like you could talk about, the relationship of you with someone else, or the relationship of, this paper with this table or whatever. But they're a continuum. You're taking aspects of something that is already a single field, and you're abstracting separate elements out of it, and then analyzing their interrelationship with those separate elements as if they were separate. But they aren't actually separate because they're embedded in this continuum. Right? I can't take you and lift you out of my field of vision and talk about you in my field of vision. I close my eyes, you disappear with the world. So you're one with the world experientially. Right? So you're integrated. The actuality of you, what you are experientially, which is the only actuality there is integrated. I mean, from my point of view, with you as an object. From your point of view, the same phenomena applies, but with a different perspective. Right?
And so that it sounds very strange from that point of view to extract dictums or dharma or like
Doesn't it?
sila or something like that.
Doesn't it?
So that just doesn't make sense. Or?
Doesn't make much sense.
Yeah.
But you're free to do it.
But it seems like it has a certain value.
Well, people.
Like it perpetuates more love or harmony.
It perpetuates love and harmony, perhaps, but there's plenty of. But what do you do with the disharmony and the lack of love that's also being perpetuated? That perpetuation is not skillful at dealing with the other perpetuation, whereas just an open-ended inclusiveness can skillfully deal with all that. You can deal with love, you can deal with harmony, you can deal with chaos, you can deal with disharmony, you can deal with conflict, because it's all just aspects of the same thing. It's all just degrees of energy interaction on the same spectrum, where one extreme of the spectrum is at some absolute extreme of discontinuity, of conflict, and another extreme is the other degree end of the spectrum is some absolute degree of absolute harmony and consonance and reinforcement. And the actuality of experiential energy phenomena seem to fall within the spectrum. But you discover something very slippery, because when you look at any particular energy phenomena, but experiential energy phenomena, in other words, any actuality within your experience, you find something very strange. You can't actually precisely define it. You can't actually precisely say what it is. So it has an indeterminacy, it has a fuzziness. So you can't pin it down whether it's exactly this or exactly that. And the closer you look, the less definable it is, which is the opposite result that one might expect, right? You know, our knee-jerk analysis of the world works because we don't look very closely. If I don't look very closely, yeah, you're you and you're you, and the floor is the floor, and they're very separate and they have nothing to do with each other, and they're all very stable, and we're just sitting here going through time, not changing much. But if you look very closely at the actual experiential reality of these phenomena, you discover a very strange thing. In fact, everything is changing and slipping all the time. And you can't actually separate one thing from another. And you discover that drawing these differences is very arbitrary. Like I can talk about you're you and the rest of the room is not you. Or I can talk about your left foot is your left foot and your right foot's your right foot, and they aren't each other. I can talk about, how, that the right side of your left foot and the left side of your left foot aren't. In other words, you can draw differences wherever you want and create as many sub-entities as you want, but you haven't actually separated anything out. It's still just a continuum. And this is how we abstract all the entities that we imagine populate our experience. So, everything you could name within your experience, within, say, your visual field right now, is all just labels of arbitrarily differentiated experiential aspects of a continuum, right? Of the continuum of your visual field. And the only actuality is your visual field. I mean, it appears infinitely differentiated, but it's infinitely differentiated. I mean, you could separate out each pixel if you wanted to, You could look at the computer screen and you're watching a movie on a computer screen, and so there's the hero running across the screen, running away from the bad guy or something, say, right? But then you look closer, and it's not a hero and a bad guy; it's a bunch of little pixels flashing. So it's all where you want to draw the line. There's no actual lines. It's all supplied analytically. It's supplied subjectively by the observing intelligence.
And like, so I just choose at some point to draw a line.
Sure. But to say you choose, you don't necessarily consciously choose. It's not like you decide to do it necessarily. It's maybe a result of habit, it may be a result of proclivity, it may be a result of, who knows what. You have a tendency to draw these lines, perhaps, to think of these things in various ways. And that's fine. It's not like you need to not do that. This is very doable and very practical to do. But the valuable thing, what I'm arguing, the valuable thing is to notice that it is arbitrary, to notice that you are doing it and that these divisions are not actually objective. And then, which gives you more freedom. You have greater freedom because all of a sudden, instead of being stuck with things the way they are, you can slice and dice them any way it's convenient for you. Especially in philosophy. I mean, philosophers are experts in slicing and dicing, building up your argument. Spin doctor it in a way that reinforces your point of view.
Kind of related, I think, is the nature of reality and how we seem to share certain reality. Thinking that each one of us could walk through that. Walk through a wall and bump into it the same sort of way. We might have different perceptions, but there seems to be some shared common reality. It's a reality by democracy.
Not actually, if you look closely, because in the first place, no observer has any access to any reality other than their own observation. So in other words, you can go walk into that wall, And you can watch other people walk into that wall, but watching other people walking into that wall and you walking into that wall is not the same thing. You may use the same words to describe it, but that doesn't make the event the same. Because you don't know whether they actually exist and are perceiving entities like you are, or whether they're just apparitions that you're hallucinating in your experience. Like, for example, in a dream, you may be talking to or interacting with dozens of people. You may have very profound, passionate, intimate interactions with people, and you wake up and poof, they're all gone. Were they ever there? You can't know. All you can know is they appeared. What you can know for sure is that they were your perception, right? They were your experience.
So am I conceiving shared reality?
No, you're thinking of it as a shared reality. You're hypothesizing it's a shared reality, but you can't verify that because of the simple fact that you only have access to your own experience. As far as you know, your experience alone exists. That doesn't mean it does, but it may be so. You may be hallucinating all this. I'm not saying you are, but I'm not. But you can't know. No, well, it'd be convenient actually, wouldn't it?
So within the framework of I don't know that anything really exists.
Well, you know that it exists as experiencing to the extent that it does. Well, this experience is happening, which means your experience as far as you know. And you may not be able to know what it is, but that it is, whatever it is an undeniable presence, I assume you would say. Right? In other words, experiencing is happening. It may or may not be of an objective world. It may or may not be being experienced by this body. It may or may not, whatever. But that it is occurring, whatever it is a given, right? I mean, that's pretty much self-verifying or true.
Within my perception.
Well, of course. I mean, that's all you have. That's all you have, right?
It could be my hallucination.
Of course. You can't know, can you? How could you know?
So we just kind of enjoy each other's hallucination.
Well, we enjoy the interaction is a meaningful interaction to the extent it is a meaningful interaction. It doesn't need to be objectively true. You can have very profound, moving interactions in dreams, and it doesn't matter whether the beings you're interacting with are actually there or not. It's the interaction that's valuable, that's self-verifying or valuable in itself. I mean, you can watch a movie and be very moved by the play of the characters, and they're a complete fiction. Yeah, exactly. And this is pixels too, essentially. Or whatever. If there was a minimum unit of experiential, medium, in the various sense fields and mental fields and so on. Yeah, whatever. Who knows? Yeah. But it's interesting to look at.
So, obviously, my experience is important.
Well, they're the only actual ones to you. I mean, of course. Yeah, you can't know if his experience exists. On the other hand, you can enjoy interrelating with him very profoundly and very multidimensionally. He doesn't need to actually exist as an experiencer for that to occur. He may or may not, but that's his problem. Of course, he could be an apparition. But it's irrelevant from your perspective whether that's the case, right? I don't know if any of you exist. I never have known. I can't know. But it's irrelevant to me whether or not you do, because the dance of this interaction is beautiful, is elegant, and has its own value that is palpable to me. So it's delightful for me to interact in this kind of a medium. I don't need for it to be real, and for you to actually exist or be getting anything. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. I don't know. That's your problem. I know why I'm here. I don't know why you're here.
I don't know.
Well, hey.
But just thinking about these things, I mean, you have no almost seems to me like there's something that's beyond that I'm trying to understand.
Sure, absolutely.
That isn't really being addressed in this conversation of my experiences.
But what I think you'll find, if, particularly if you explore tarot and if you continue exploring this kind of stuff that I'm suggesting, is the beyond is in your experience, because your experience itself is beyond. The experiencing itself is vastly and utterly and absolutely beyond what you hold it to be, what it feels like to be. And so plumbing the depths of that and discovering the possibilities within that is what I'm suggesting. And I think you'll find, I mean, the magic of the tarot and this incredible intelligence that is to be found there and so on and so forth is all implicit in what you are. Yeah, it is nice. It's totally nice. it's very fortunate that that's the case. I mean, yeah, you know, it's typical and typical modern Western. I don't know, maybe typical human, but certainly I can say a typical modern Western mindset seems to be a sort of a mindset of self-belittling and self-criticism and thinking of ourselves as somehow small or limited or whatever. And it's a shame because you're not. You're actually the bottomless infinite reality itself. Not in some philosophical sense, but literally, concretely. That happens to be what you are. And so you're free to explore that and take advantage of it. And the tarot is a very good medium to do that. Because that's why the tarot is as amazing as it is. Because it draws on the coincidence of what reality happens to be, what you happen to be.
But what does I mean to you, Peter? Just the ability to have experiences? Is it just a convenient device to talk to so-called other people because you think that you understand it? I mean, I have memories of other teachers who start with who am I, and then they would fill out my finger what are my experiences.
Well, if one looks for actuality, the only actuality that can be found is the actuality of experiencing.
Yeah.
Right? And what I can be said to mean in terms of its possible definitions is all sorts of things. It can theoretically allude to some experiencer that's watching it. It can theoretically allude to some controlling potency that's somehow running something. I mean, there's all sorts of things that can theoretically allude to.
Yeah.
But since the only actuality I can find is the actuality of this experiencing that is manifestly present, and if I is a real word that actually refers to anything real, then it must be referring to this, because this is the only reality I can find. So this is I.
So you're already stuck with the English language, so you're humoring yourself or us or whatever it's here by using words like that.
I'm sorry? Yeah?
Well, again, I'm playing with the idea that my reality seems to be different than yours. And we're just stuck with the English language.
Right.
We seem in this illusion to be limited by words like that.
Well, we're not stuck with it, but it's one of the things we can play with. We can use it, and the human language is wonderful. It's delightful, and it becomes even more powerful when you begin to see what it really refers to. If you're gullible enough to believe the definitions of words that you've been educated to be, and you think they really mean that, and basically if you're a sucker, then we're all very familiar with that way of being with words. But when you begin to look at what words really refer to, it gets very interesting. So I is this. You are this. So I can talk about I'm talking to you, and I'm saying this talks to this, because this is talking is present. I is this. You is this. And if I look at it that way, it's like, yeah, that's kind of what it is.
So when you're talking about something else, you just use I as a shortcut because perhaps in this phenomenal realm that has some meaning.
Well, all words mean what they really mean, which is this.
Yeah.
and there's no contradiction. It's not like you have to, you know, step off into some bullshitting lying realm to use words the way people think they're using, imagine they're using them. If you use words in terms of their actual context, it turns out they make perfect sense. It works very well. There's no schism there. There's no contradiction.
Actually, I think that no words really do it very completely.
Of course. Of course. And even when you're talking, you're also not talking. So in between every word I say, I'm not saying any words. And when I say any word, there's all the other words that I'm not saying that are also as present as whatever I'm saying, and so on and so forth. I mean, the context is always here. You know, it's all, it gets, you know, what makes it slippery and confusing is the fact that our consciousness works on a strange basis of focus and suggestion, like a kind of hypnosis. So if I talk about, you know, I talk about this purple pen on this table here, all of a sudden you're erect, you know, to some extent you are forced to have your attention drawn to that. It's hypnosis is what it is. But all language works essentially by that mechanism. So if someone comes up to you and starts talking to you, they're forcing you more or less to focus on what you think they're talking about to some extent. It's just it's in the nature of the way language and consciousness works. So I'm talking about all this stuff, and I'm sort of forcing you to some extent look at what you think that I'm talking about, because I'm not talking. If I was talking about, you know, the best movies of 2014, it would be a whole different, very different conversation, and then you would be more or less forced to be looking at that I'm talking about, just because the words are present, and when the words are present, your consciousness to some extent gets seduced into zooming in on it, zooming in on what it thinks they're about. And this is a constant in the equation. You can't avoid it. It's not a problem, but it's interesting to notice that, you know, this zooming in faculty, or this focusing in faculty, the consciousness, and this, you know, effortlessly gets seduced into with semantics and such. Mm-hmm. Oh, thank you. Jenny or Soul, whoever. Thank you.
Peter, if we say other people are apparitions, or just nice welded,
Right.
It seems then that also the perception of one's body.
Very well observed.
All of the sensations.
Yes. Yes. Exactly so. Well, it is an apparition. How do you know you have a body? Because you perceive it. And when you go to sleep, you stop perceiving your body, and yet you don't go anywhere. The perceiving doesn't go anywhere. It looks very different. And then you start dreaming, and there may be a very different body present. I don't know if you can recall it, but if you ever dreamed where you had a very different body, or you were younger, or you were a different gender, or something like that, or you were, yeah. And so that apparition all of a sudden is right there, and the consciousness can effortlessly identify with it, because just exactly the same way as your consciousness perhaps effortlessly identifies with the body that it's perceiving now as being yours, right?
I mean, it's an apparition.
Yeah.
And thus, so in a way, all this you're saying, this is I, and yet.
Yeah. There's nothing but apparition.
But there's nothing here.
Right.
That is this. I mean, it's not like the object.
Yeah. 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 And yet, there's no division. There's nothing but apparition, but it's not like the apparition is separate from some nothingness that is here. They're one and the same. The nothingness is the apparition. I mean, you've heard me use this phrase, radiant presence. Yeah, you've heard me use this phrase, radiant presence. This is exactly what this means. The radiance is all of this apparition on all these different levels. And the presence is the fact that it's actual, it's here, it is this, and the nature of this is to always show up as a field of apparition. And the field is always full. There's never anything missing. The field of vision is always full. You close your eyes, it's still full of like little fine little sparkles and shadows, right? You go to sleep, the field of vision is still full. God knows what it's full of, because it's not rational. You start dreaming, it's still full, right? You wake up, it's full. There's no point where it actually shuts off. And all the experiential field, if you look at it closely, it's always full. It's always turned on. It's always open.
And so much mutating,
Yeah, it's absolutely unstable. It always looks like something, it presents with information, but exactly what that information is absolutely dynamic and unstable. So any apparent configuration or differentiation of qualities that are appearing is unique and instantaneous in the moment, is already gone. And even in that moment, you can't tell what it was because A, because it's already gone, and because B, there's too much information density, right? It's like what am I seeing now? There's no way I can say what I'm seeing. I'm seeing a bazillion colors and shades and shapes, and they're already gone, right? So and this is the constant condition. It's always the case that this full field of apparition is presenting with infinite depth of information, none of which is ever resolvable, absolute instability, never repeats, and there you go. Here we are.
Within that, you have your identity,
Sure.
and you have your so-called afflictions and all this other
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
Those are also apparitions.
Yeah, exactly.
Those are apparitions.
Yeah, they're apparitions, and in a way, they could be said to be kind of second or derivative apparitions, in the sense that they're largely held to be abstracted from basic apparitions. Like I may have my body, and then I may think my body's ugly, and so I think that the ugliness that I think my body has is sort of being appended to the notion of my body. But in actual fact, as you point out, the apparition of the body is an apparition, and the apparition of the thoughts or feelings or emotions of ugliness or whatever the quality is just there. I mean, where's it come from? What's it made of? Yeah, but if you look closely, there's not actually, nothing's removed from anything, because itself is just an apparition. It's just a present thought or a present emotion, and where does it come from? Where does it go to? What's it made of? How is it different from any other apparition? It's just a continuum of instantaneous apparition that's just infinitely dimensional, infinitely varied in all its textures and so on.
Stop generating apparitions like that.
Who knows? You'll find that soon enough. Not soon enough. You're in a rush. Well, maybe you'll find out sooner then. But the answer is no, because death itself is just an apparition, and what the apparition is occurring within is not dependent upon the bodies. The bodies are dependent upon it. So I think that you'll find when you die, it's not going to be very different than when you wake up from the dream or when you go to sleep. It's just a change of perspective, a change of panorama.
My friend was studying it, because I look at the dead, and then it says people who are dead and never dead.
You're dead, and you think you're alive.
Yeah.
Here you are in this disembodied field of vision, right? Do you see that?
But I was going to say, of course, I also have no idea if there's actually a forgotten if they were dead. I actually have no idea if people die or live at this point, right? Since I don't know what a person is.
Of course, you can't. How can you know? Because all of these things are names for things that people hold to be the case, and it can't be verified whether or not they are. I mean, typically people are terrified of dying, right? Just basic psychology, you're more or less afraid of dying. But you're not really afraid of dying, you're afraid of your fantasy of what death is. Because you don't know what dying, how can you even know what dying is? You can't know until you're in it. It's like being afraid of anything you've never experienced, you're not afraid of it, you're afraid of your fantasy of it, which is not the same thing. You will be an expert on death on your deathbed. And until then, you're not qualified to anticipate it. Just like tomorrow, you're an expert on tomorrow. Now you're not. You can imagine what's going to happen tomorrow. You can have all sorts of hopes or fears about what's going to happen. Wonderful things tomorrow, horrible things tomorrow. But you don't know. They're all fantasies until tomorrow happens. And what happens experientially will be different than you expect it to be. No matter how elaborate your fantasies of what's going to happen, it will be different. It's always like that. The actuality is always deviates from the fantasy of expectation, doesn't it? You can't know what the next moment's going to look like. You certainly can't know what the next day is going to look like.
Maybe if the people don't know they're dead because they've lost that ability or problem with analyzing what's thinking. If that's even true. It's like guiding people to get to better places by, going to the light and stuff. And, because they can hear. Because many people can hear after they're dead. So, of course, we don't know if that's true either. But I'm just saying, maybe it kind of suggests that if they don't know they're dead, they've lost that ability to analyze. And maybe they're in some realm that includes what we call life and death.
But the ability
Yeah, we don't know.
ability to analyze is very arbitrary.
Right.
I mean, if you could go out on the street, and most of the people you encounter don't have much of an ability to analyze. They may think they do, but they have an ability to analyze within the gamut of what they're confident is the case. They don't have the ability to analyze whether or not that is the case. And that's the problem with dead people analyzing whether or not they're dead.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you analyze right now. Can you be certain you're not dead? Can you be certain you're in the afterlife? Just look at it. And how can you know?
It's kind of a nice kind of maybe it could be that too.
Well, how can you know? How can you know?
That's all right. You can handle it.
And the point of all this is not to necessarily, except for amusement, to trip out on all these possibilities. The point of all this is to notice this actuality that's here, and notice that it is the actual actuality, and learn to differentiate between what's actually present with our abstractions and analyses of it, all of which exist solely in imagination. And typically, in terms of the typical modern human mindset, people have all of that completely asked backwards. People think that abstractions that they're holding about actuality are the actuality, and conversely, that the actuality is an abstraction, which is, a peculiar thing. But basically, you have to do the math for yourself. You have to look for yourself and see for yourself what is really here, and the way in which it is really here. Let it show you what it is, rather than telling it what it is and having a priori, a preconceived idea of what it is, and then expecting it to conform to that, which is the way typically people approach spirituality or philosophies. They think they know what they want to find before, and then they just look for verification of it. And of course, this is like the ultimate Rorschach box, so it's glad to oblige.
The concept of actuality. I'm still having a hard time with it because I can more easily understand that everything's an aberration.
Everything's a what?
Aberration.
Aberration? An aberration of what?
Well, that everything that I am perceiving is a creation within my own mind.
Okay.
I don't know that anything else.
Right.
Truly,
Well, if it is a creation within your own mind, that is an actuality that it is that.
So my perception is the actuality?
Look and see. I would say, yeah. I mean,
I'm running
there is actuality, right? I mean, we wouldn't be here having this conversation if this is not a simple nothing. This is not like black, zero, zip, blank piece of paper, because it sure don't look like that.
Well, I have an imagination.
Well, sure.
Okay.
Well, imagination is actual, but this experiencing is actual, and then so given that as a starting point, then you can begin to look at it in terms of things like imagination and mind and consciousness and various other things. But those are abstractions. The experiencing is the actuality, is your starting point, right?
So if you went back to that analogy that you started with, that's with me,
Mm-hmm.
every single moment that you're looking at your hand is an actuality.
Absolutely.
And then those actualities are different from one another
Absolutely.
based on kind of perception.
Absolutely. This is self-evident. But it's true not because of theory. It's true because look for yourself.
Well, yeah, but there's the problem.
How so?
Well, if I'm trusting my senses and I don't know that the perception are real, then how do I know that my actuality?
Well, but the actuality is there's real is an abstract. The real that you're positing there is an abstraction. The actuality of experiencing is actual. You don't need to worry about whether or not, like, is this a dream or not? Is this in my imagination or not? That's irrelevant because it is actually what it is, regardless of whether it is any of those things. If suppose this is all your imagination, right? Suppose you're a psychotic, crazy person somewhere locked into a rubber room and you're hallucinating all this. Let's just imagine. It's a thought experiment. Let's imagine that. But still, it's this experiencing is an actuality for you as the actuality of your experiencing, right? And then you can starting from that, you can see, well, A, is there anything else outside of that I can incorporate into that to shed more light on what's going on? And B, if not, he's starting from the actuality of this experiencing, what can I actually reliably derive from that? And so you can just start with that. I mean, that this experiencing is present as experiencing, let's say, is undeniable. So given that, so you've got right there, you've got your foot in the door of actuality. This is bedrock. This is really, this experiencing is really happening, regardless of what it is or how it is or whether it's real or imagined or whatever that would mean. So this is here. Now starting from this actuality, where can I go? What can I build on? What can I derive from this with certainty? You can derive anything you want from it hypothetically. I mean, we're all experts at doing that, right? That's a human stock and trade.
And the actuality can exist outside of my perception. So,
well, how would that work? What would that look like?
well, I'm in this room.
Are you?
Well, so for the sake of argument,
Right.
if somebody just got killed in
Mm-hmm.
Oakland, I don't know about it yet.
Right. Somebody getting killed in Oakland at this point is a thought that is present here in your experience.
It's also potential, especially Oakland, probably an actuality.
It may or may not be, but the actuality is not the thought. So it's not that the thought is the actuality. It has anything to do with the actuality.
So naturality can happen or cannot outside of my perception.
Well, if an actuality happened outside your perception, it's not an actuality for you. It's only a theoretical actuality, and the idea that it's a theoretical actuality is an actuality for you.
Yeah.
So, in other words, imagine someone that you've never met, you're never going to meet, but they're out there somewhere. Okay, the only thing you can know about them whatsoever is that imagination that they exist, which is actual. The imagining is actual, but that's the only actuality they have for you. Right?
It's kind of explains the nature of mood.
Yeah.
Because there are people who believe that the Holocaust didn't happen.
Of course. The Holocaust didn't happen if you weren't there. if you were there, your experience happened, and you may call what your experience is the Holocaust. But the Holocaust is not a single thing. Let's take an example. Instead of going to the Holocaust, let's go to the war in Iraq. Let's just pick an arbitrary 5-year period. Slice that and say, okay, let's look at this 5-year period of the war in Iraq. Now, the war in Iraq is supposedly an objective event that is actually out there, right? And yet, what did that 5-year period look like experientially to people who are experienced it first person who were there? Right? Well, but we don't know, but if you could know, it would still be a million different stories. You know, for one person on one day, the war in Iraq might look like making love. For another person on another day, the war in Iraq might look like looking for food. For another person on another day, the war in Iraq might look like taking a lot of money. For another person, so where's the war in Iraq? Yeah, I mean, it's a theoretical abstraction, abstract imagined entity that is somehow bundling together a bunch of individual experiences, all of which deviate from each other radically. I mean, you suppose the war looked. What did the war look like from the point of view of some, you know, rich general or upper level defense contractor who was sitting in air-conditioned offices all the time? And what did the war look like to some, you know, destitute, poor person who was fighting for their lives and being tortured or whatever? I mean, they both might say, yeah, this is the war in Iraq, but that's an abstraction. The actuality completely deviates. And actuality always is in the moment for the single observer. So you might say, what happened in this talk happened and it was an event, but that's not true. Your experience of what's happening here is unique, and no one else is experiencing it exactly the same way you are. And the way you're experiencing it changes from instant to instant, you know, and no one else can know what that is. And so everyone else's experience of it is different. So where's the event? If there is no event, the event is an abstraction. The actuality is a bunch of completely irreconcilable experiences, which can never know each other. So even if they exist is an abstraction itself. Good. When else could it happen?
Because
Where can you find where would you find the past? The only way you find the past is the thought of the past that you have in the present. And you remember what you had for lunch yesterday, you're remembering it now. You can't go back there and make that actual. And if you did, then that would be now.
because my daughter has been bringing up so many things that happened in her life that I was part of that I forgot.
Of course.
And it's painful.
Mhm.
It's sad, you know, but she's able to just bring stuff forward.
But when she's doing that, she's not actually bringing up actual events. She's bringing up her abstracted versions of those events, which reflects her real-time meaningfulness. And what she remembers one day will be slightly different from what she remembers another day, depending on her current meaningfulness.
What's so interesting about that is, always strike when people say, well, expression and imagination. There's no just.
No, for sure.
The fact that I am just creating all this stuff,
Yeah.
so that his daughter is creating this out of nothing.
No, it's a show. It's a tour de force. It's a show of such astounding, inconceivable functionality. I can remember and feel my entire history, you know, and that's all happening right now. Bang, just being generated, just as a show of inconceivable consciousness, intelligence, power. Like just bang, it's just like completely bootstrapped. Your entire history is recreated every instant, spontaneously in your consciousness. I mean, that's mind-blowingly powerful. You know, it's mind-blowing potency.
You really remember everything?
But you can't remember. There's no everything to remember. Whatever you remember is what you remember, and that's everything. And if you remember nothing, that's the everything that you're remembering.
Now you're showing you're close to that. That's good.
No, but think about it. I mean, yeah, I definitely that for sure.
Yeah.
But also look at it for real. I mean, suppose, in other words, suppose you just had a blackout or a seizure or instantaneous Alzheimer's or something, and all of a sudden you didn't remember your past at all. Then that would be the past. That would be the actuality you remember. In other words, it's not there when you're not thinking of it.
The past that my daughter remembers
Right.
triggers the past recollections from me.
Right. But it's not. But you're calling it triggering past recollections. But what it actually is doing is a real-time interaction in your own consciousness and imagination. Of course, it happens in the present. When does the triggering is a word for something that's happening now, right? And so the way that happens depends upon what she's like now and what you're like now, and the energy interaction of the way that shapes up, right? What she chooses to say, what you choose to say, what you happen to remember of that, what she happens to remember of that, her mood, your mood, emotions that are present, and, all of which is all real time, of course. When else would it be? And it may or may not be based on something that actually happened, but that's basically irrelevant. You can have a heated argument with someone about what just happened in a movie, which never happened to anyone, right? And it's no different really than having an emotional interaction about the past, because the meaningfulness is supplied in the present. Right? It's meaningful because it's meaningful now. It may or may not have been meaningful when then was now, but the meaningfulness is always now. Right? Emotion is always now. Right?
So thinking what's happening with his daughter in a way is what you were talking about earlier. I mean, it's a unity, but it's a unity of one.
Mm-hmm.
It's his unity. And
Of course. From his point of view, it's his
from
unity.
his point of view,
From her point of view, it's her unity.
Yeah.
She lives in a world where you're her father, and you're just that's what you are, which is all about her. And you live in a world where she's your daughter, which is all about you, and they're not the same world. How could they be? Because she of course, and she's looking at you, across a generation boundary, across a cultural boundary, across a, I mean, the whole mental framework is just radically different. Well, she may or may not, but you don't know how much you have to remember because it's all manufactured in real time. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed the phenomena. I've noticed it as I've aged. I don't feel like I have any more history. There's more facts that I can remember. But if I feel like how long I've been here, when I was 2 years was like what 60 years feels like now. 2 years was a really long time, and now it's 60 years, 60-some years. And that feels like the same real long time. I mean, it's vague, of course, but because, but it's funny that my past is as long as it has always been. Sure. Well, I've noticed this subjectively. I don't know how it is for you, but I've noticed that. I mean, it's as though my past is 100% of my past, and when I was 2 years old, a year was 50% of my history. And now that I'm 60, a year is 1/60th of my history, so years seem a lot shorter. But it's not like there's actually been an accumulation. I mean, just sort of the way the feeling tone of it to me. I mean, I don't know. This is just chatter, but it's an interesting phenomenon I've noticed.
Doesn't the stuff have to be like perceptions have to be negotiated with people for people to have relationships?
They are.
Well,
They are. So, last thing of a relationship you've ever had? There's an awful lot of negotiating involved. Well, I mean, that's another kind of negotiation. Think about it.
I just think that like I want a different relationship with the person I have a relationship with,
Okay.
and there's like pain in the relationship that I want the other person to agree to do something about so that I you can get rid of that pain.
Sure, no doubt they're coming with a similar complexity, of course. But this is how it is, of course, because see, this is the peculiar aspect. It is again very readily observable. We use the same words, so it's easy to assume we're talking about the same things. But in actuality, the words you're using refer to realities in your experience, and the words a person in a relationship would say is using the same words, but they're using them their way, referring to their reality, which is different. So what one person says love and what you say love is different. But one person, and that's why people have such a difficult time understanding each other, and particularly this becomes very apparent in a relationship where you're really trying to mesh more intimately or profoundly, right? Because there's a lot of negotiation involved, mainly because we don't understand what we're talking about, even though we're using the same words, because we're using them in different ways.
And if I have a perception that that person is being dishonest,
But that's just how you're seeing it in that instant, and you can't know.
They tell me, yes, I was being dishonest.
Maybe, sure. Sure, yeah, maybe, sure.
I feel like I need them to, I guess I just need that feeling that they're being honest.
Then that'd be nice.
And then
but again, honesty is very, very difficult, simply because communication is always inexact, and because the essential values of people are diverge ultimately. It's easy to have the fantasy that, we're all pretty much the same, but nothing could be farther from the truth. People are unique energy systems, and that people are so different from each other, and we aren't usually aware of that because we have this process of enculturation where we all kind of wear the same clothes, and we all kind of do the same mannerisms, and we all kind of use a certain language, and so it's easy to assume we're all in the same boat or approaching it from the same way, but that's not true. People are unique, very, very different. People diverge from each other enormously. And so there's an inherent communication problem, because given A, the fact of this inherent divergence, and B, the fact of the gross inexactitude and imprecision of language, it's a recipe for disaster. And this, of course, is what we find in behavioral. Right? I mean, look at politics, look at relationships, look at, anything. There's just, it's a mess. Because there's different people who have different goals, approaching them in different ways, using a very imprecise language that doesn't capture what they're really doing, and the other people are using the same language for completely different motivations and different orientations and different everything. So it's a mishmash, which of course is what we see.
Well, we can talk about a love or harmony.
Of course, because that's the fundamental condition. No matter how divergent energy systems are from each other, they're fundamentally identical. Because they're just fundamentally the same thing. They're fundamentally this one reality that is you. Everything that happens is you. So everything is in harmony. No matter how seemingly discordant it is, it's like a symphony. Imagine a symphony written by a madman that has some of the most beautiful strains you can imagine, and some of the most horrible, chaotic dissonances. And this is what the energy field of your experience consists of. It's like a symphony of all of these energies, and some of them are these amazing consonances, and some of them gross dissonances, and most of it's sort of waffling in between that.
So as long as I'm okay with the difference in precision of my experience,
experience is precise.
Okay.
It's the trying to communicate it. In semantics, it's imprecise. Experience is very precise, but experience is very slippery, because the precision of experience is also absolutely indeterminate. This is part of the weirdness of experience, and you can find this if you look at your field of vision. In other words, right now you're seeing exactly what you're seeing, very sharp, very clearly, as clearly as you are, right? And yet if you look very, very closely at anything you see, you can't tell exactly what color it is. You can't tell exactly what shape it is. It's fuzzy, it's blurred, it smears into otherness. It doesn't have sharp edges. You can't resolve it precisely. And yet, it is precisely what it is. So it is precisely imprecise. It is precisely unresolvable. But it is that very precisely. So it's a very paradoxical situation, because we ordinarily think of precision and unresolvability as sort of mutually exclusive or contradictory. In actuality, they're the same thing. The nature of reality is such that those two conditions always coexist exactly. And the more specificity you have, the more unresolvability you have. In other words, if you look really closer at something, you can say you get an electron microscope and really look at something really, really closely, you get much, much more precision, right? The detail just goes whoop, but at the same time, all the details go fuzzy. So you increase the precision, the specificity, but you don't actually increase the resolvability. So at any level of scale, and this is just talking about scale, but on any other level of observation or mode of observation whatsoever, you discover the same constant phenomenon of absolute specificity and absolute undeterminacy. Physicists found this, in quantum mechanics. You look at particles and you look at these phenomena, and you can look at them very, very closely, but the closer you look at them, the stranger they are, and you can't pin down how it's going on. And so modern physics, is absolutely inconceivable, and you can only approach it mathematically because it's just too weird. Because it's not, they're looking at these things and they don't turn out to be things. they turn out to be much weirder, more slippery phenomena. And this happens on all levels on all scales of perception, on all scales of experience. And yet, so here's this absolutely precise field of your experience that's happening right now, just the way it is. That is precise, but also unresolvable. And you are completely incapable of communicating that precisely to anyone else. I mean, you could sit down and try to formulate within one paragraph, say, using words, anything, something you're seeing. I'm seeing something and I'm going to describe to you very precisely exactly what I'm seeing. And you wouldn't be able to do it. Or exactly what you're feeling, or exactly what your motivation is. You would not be able to do it, because the nature of the actuality experientially is this fractal, infinite, amorphous weirdness that is, that is just a whole universe within itself. That is not particularly consonant anyway. And then, so of course, how do you put that into words? Because it's not simply this or simply that. And words always are this or that. It's black or it's white. It is or it isn't. It's good or it's bad. It's forward or it's back. But the actuality experience isn't like that. The actual experience is very vague and sloppy and amorphous, and you can't pin it down. Look at emotions, right? Emotions are just these, say, oh, I'm angry, Okay, but look at how you really feel. Look at what the anger actually is. It's present if you're angry, or whenever you feel an emotion. You look at what it is, and it's just this weird, just this weird whatever, this weird energy that's not precise, it's not sharp, doesn't have a precise, clear core. It's just it's a sea of all sorts of parameters, and it's not particularly coherent, right? You can sum it up as saying as anger or love or happy, but the particular nuance of exactly what it is eludes those kind of words, eludes any words if you come up with. Fortunately, you're not limited to language. So all of our interactions are profoundly multidimensional. Even so, you and I are sitting here, and we're talking, right? We're speaking to each other, but we're also seeing each other. There's body language. There may be vibes or psychic impression. Who knows what, right? But so the experience of being with another person is a very multidimensional experience, even if most of that is not particularly rational or, you know, parsable or describable. But of course, nothing is rational or parsable or describable, so there's no surprise there. So you can have very intimate exchanges with people, and the superficialities of that is just a small part of what's going on. So there's real communication that happens at a nonverbal level, or let's say nonverbal levels. I mean, you can walk into a room, say you walk into a store you've never been in before, there's a bunch of people in the store you've never seen before, and you'll immediately might get a hit on some people. You might look at someone and say, God, I really don't like that. Right? Or you look at someone and you just really like them. Whatever, right? And you can sit and analyze it and think why, but it's an instantaneous, engagement that has has flavor, right? And so there's all these kinds of interactions with apparitional patterns, with phenomena, that occur immediately and non-verbally. Or, inanimate objects. You can walk into a place, you can be in a place like this and just see things that you have a feeling about things. Things, you kind of like something, you kind of don't like something else is really weird. I mean, just for no reason, just by energy presence, by flavor, or whatever. Sure, and that's very easy to see. Right? I mean, all these kinds of things. Yeah, but they're all.
It's not like we actually did anything.
No.
Gave me the truth.
No, or drivers. When I'm driving, I can almost always tell what the car ahead of me is going to do. I know, like if I'm in a lane, I can know if they're going to stay in the lane or if they're going to leave the lane. And I'm right most of the time. And it's just there's no basis for it. It's just I feels like this guy's going to be merging left, and after a while they usually do. I'm not always right, but I get that feeling, and so there's a lot of nonverbal stuff that we don't have description for. I mean, it's immediately obvious when you're with people, because you perceive a flavor of people that's above and beyond anything rational or logical. Just a flavor. I mean, I call it seeing the aura. Where you just people have a quality that is just. I mean, it's completely non-linear and non-verbal and so on and so forth. But it's like they're a kind of music. It's like each person is a different piece of music, and you can sort of feel what the feeling of that piece of music is just immediately, just by presence, without you don't need to think about it. It's just there. Right? We're not used to acknowledging these things in terms of consensus reality, but experientially, that's pretty self-evident. Anyhow, it's about quitting time, so I'm gonna shut down the machinery, wish our online friends good night, or good whatever.